Wow, that is a um, a deep question that requires a bit of review. Basically, I would say that my journey has been one of reconciliation, trying to reconcile many things that have occurred in my youth and on into my adult years and through that transitional stage from, like teens into your 20s when there were things that were happening around me that I guess you could say were not common. People were being healed in situations. I did a lot of martial arts. I've studied martial arts since I was like, I think, 9 years old. Um, and there were experiences where people might have got hurt or they might have, had a headache after a bout or something like that. And I would reach out to touch their head and ask them if they were okay. And I would see something leave. And all of a sudden their headache would be gone and they'd be like, what was that? How'd you do that? And it was like at that stage in my life, I didn't know. So I was trying to reconcile what is this? And in my youth, or like the ignorance of my youth, I honestly just assumed everybody could do that. As I mean, that was the norm. And I just happened to be the first one in that setting. Um, However, as I aged and started to get more of a sense of how people function and how we engage in relationships and how we interacted with one another beyond the situations I faced at home and beyond the situations I faced in, neighborhood settings and stuff. I started to recognize that that was not the common thing. That wasn't the way that things worked. In my adult years, I now know that everybody is able to do this, but people aren't awake to it. They're asleep to the nature of their full self. So, what I mean by this process of reconciling, there were things that I knew in me that didn't fit the, I mean, the word today is the narrative of the general surroundings, the narrative of the church, the narrative of certain people instructing me to be a certain way or telling me to do certain things. And again, I had to reconcile what was going on because throughout that early stage of my life and progressing into my adult years, I started to receive confirmation that what I understood within me, different than what they were saying in the church or within the institutions of education, I was finding out that what I was knowing inside me was actually supported in truth by biblical theologians that weren't teaching the same thing they were learning. They were teaching what the church said, not what they'd learned through theological history and theological seminary and understanding around the dialogue that comes through scriptures of different beliefs and the living word of God's presence within. So I was trying to reconcile how did I know this? Whether it's like, even like when, I remember getting slapped once by a nurse and not a nurse, forgive me, a nun when I was younger and I was an altar boy and we were being instructed in the Our Father and they kept saying the Our Father and I was like, but my God is not a man. And I got slapped and I learned to shut my mouth and just, okay, I won't say that anymore because I had a sense of God being bigger than Father. And and then I had this knowing within me that there was a broader and deeper expression of Abun, this this sense of knowing that there was a living presence that was God within me and God within you and God within them. And I couldn't reconcile why they weren't permitting me to say something that I had to squelch, shut down, and quiet within myself when it seemed like it was real and better. So as life progressed, I started reaching out. Well, honestly, I shut down. When I started getting punished for saying what I thought I knew, I just kind of internalized. I shut down, and then I kind of went way off in my teenage years and partying, and just kind of trying to squelch or shut down the intensity of what I had as knowings within me, because again, they didn't fit the narrative. And if they were describing a fearful God, I was like, no, why would I fear God, the one that I awe? I hold in awe of God. I am in wonder of God and wonder of creation. But they were teaching us to fear God. But then I also had a knowing within me that that was never the way God was described. And eventually found a theologian, biblical theologian, that said, oh, yeah, well, no, we were never instructed to fear God. The original language was that we would hold Yahweh Elohim in awe above all things of creation. And I'm like, that's the one I know within me. So again, back to this process of reconciliation, I was trying to reconcile all this because I wasn't taught this. I wasn't taught of the world that these things were real. And then I started to discover that they actually were real. Um, so I started to cry out to God in ways that I felt were me reaching to God, not into the religious body or the religious construct of like whether the Catholic religion or the evangelical churches that used to ask me to come and do healing events or participate in them with them. And I just again, I was reconciling this process because I was like, God is so much more than what they're telling us. God is so much more than what we can define. God is so much more than you can even put into words. And I just had this knowing awareness. From that, I entered into a time of spiritual counsel and like pastoral guidance through a number of priests that were in Opus Dei. And don't fall for the Hollywood view of Opus Dei. It was basically a segment, or is a segment within the Holy Catholic Church, that they live their lives as Christ would live it in every setting. So Christ comes to work with, they are applying work, they're teaching lay people to actually center upon Christ within their sense of being, bring Christ to every thought, word, and action. And I just started counseling to these priests, and one of them made an interesting comment one time because I was asking, well, what am I supposed to do? I have like this calling. And he looked straight at me and he said, Larry, stay away from the church, for it will destroy your gifts. Surrender and be patient and allow for God to define and form it up around you. So I would say that that would be the beginning of me surrendering and saying, okay, I'm not supposed to pursue this. I'm supposed to look and discover where is God revealing his hand that I might lay hold of what God has already formed instead of me forming something and saying, look, that's what it's going to look like. And that leads us to this progressive awareness of like the second portion of your question is what led you to found Grace Healing? That progressive process, that discovery, that reconciliation, that sense of, wow, look at these things that are happening through me. And I know I'm not doing it. I'm not like somebody like Harry Potter showing up with a magic wand, wielding the wand and speaking a spell, and then something happens by the spell I chose. I'm showing up in this presence of knowing God's love within me and seeing people healed. I'm showing up in this knowing of God's love within me and feeling languages coming through me that were just blessing people and purifying things and changing things. And I went back into that reconciliation process of going, okay, God, what are you showing me? And honestly, had to die unto self and say, okay, what is it that God is showing me? Where are you leading me? What is it that you desire of me? I give myself over to you completely. I surrender all that I think that I've been taught because what I've been taught does not align with the nature of the truth I know that you to be. And that progressed to become many things of a miraculous nature that unfolded as Grace Healing took shape. It formed up around me, because that's what the priest said. Trust in God will form it up around you. And it was like, okay, I just, okay, I'll set that aside. The clanging that was going on, like this calling sense that was pulling me in some direction, I could let that go and then allow God to meet me in it, show me his hand, and that would be the progressive realization of whatever this thing was supposed to be. And I did not have the words yet of Grace Healing. And at that time, but I knew that God was going to do something and show me things, and I was to follow into it. That's where it came from. Well, as I said in the first segment of this, that it was a process of reconciliation, and even the unfolding of the formation of grace healing was divine in the way it came to be. Grace healing, I was led to set a nonprofit organization, the Grace Christian Healing, because this is about bringing healing to all people, especially those within the Christian faith. That I knew that, that there was a sense of seeing themselves as above others, but I was hearing them speak a truth that was below God. And there was judgment against other faiths and judgments against other beliefs and different things like that. And I, again, that was back to that process of reconciliation, of how do I reconcile these things when I see a God that is so much more than we have described within our Christian offerings, and so much more than what we convey to others in the nature of our actions, you know. And I guess what happened was I was sitting down to do there were a number of people that we were getting together for a board, because a board of people over this community that had yet been defined yet, but the name had taken form within me, which was Grace Healing and Grace Christian Healing and the Grace Healing Community. And in that, I started presenting to counsel that I had around me, people that had witnessed the things that God was doing through me. And again, like I'd mentioned earlier, through the Opus Dei group, there were also other priests that I encountered at different times that were saying the same thing. Larry, stay away from the church, for it will destroy your gift. Be patient and allow God to form it up around you. Trust and know that He will establish a blessing through you. And in that, I just kept looking for, okay, where is God's hand? Boom. And I act in a place where I see God's hand moving. And I sat with a couple of the people that I knew, that I trusted, and that I felt were spiritually a part of my life. And I started seeking counsel on how do I set up a nonprofit organization. And I met with one. Uh, he was a brilliant guy and had very successful business background, and he started helping me with the setup and everything, and said, "Hey, you need to talk to this woman. She's an attorney. We need to do this." And so I went to this attorney, and I sat down with her, and we went through and we filled the whole thing out and got everything all done in that. And in that, it turns out that I was doing a healing event in upstate New York, and a woman just came. It was after the event. We were at a person's house, and this woman came in from the neighborhood, and she's part of the National Church in DC and all that. And it turns out that it was her specialty to establish spiritually based nonprofit organizations. She took a look at our application and found that it was major problems throughout the whole thing. Basically, we would have been rejected cold from the IRS. We wouldn't have had our status. But she took the application with her. She submitted it for us, and within 8 days, I'm not. It blows my mind to this day. Within 8 days, I had the letter of approval in my hands and called the IRS to ask a question. And even the IRS was like, "But this can't be. You only submitted it a few days ago." I said, "Yeah, but I have the letter in hand." And I read the letter to the agent on the phone, and they were like, "This has never happened before." What had happened was the application went in, and I believe it, by this individual's method of production, but she also admitted that she had never seen anything like this happen. And it went into the application process. It was submitted. They immediately approved it, immediately coughed the letter back. The letter came back to me. And in the review of the letter, I'm sitting there and again having these questions, and I reached out to them, And again, they were like, "This can't be. This has never happened." These are their words. If this has never happened in the IRS, we've never experienced anything. There is no reason this should be. I said, "But look, I have the number here," and I read the number to them, and they said, "Well, yes, and yes, it's in the system. Okay." And then they answered my questions, and we moved on, and they just kind of dismissed it like this anomaly. I looked at it like this was a divine hand. This was a divine unfoldment or unfolding nature of something coming into form, something taking shape. And one of the things that I've always had within my heart for grace healing is this reality that we are not to be isolated to separate individual groups or settings. I just, I believe that Yeshua being here upon this planet would respond to, serve, and extend love to everybody, regardless of their belief. And that was one of the basic tenets that I felt within me for grace healing is we serve anyone and everyone from all beliefs, all religions, all communities. There is no limitation. We do not judge a person for their belief. We listen for what it is that they believe. We listen for what it is that they're experiencing. We listen it in for whatever it is that their need is. And then from that, there was something that was birthed within the grace healing community that was called the Book of Blessings. And it was a way of each time people presented needs to me or a friend that was dying of cancer or whatever, I had a knowing within me that there was a blessed result for this prayer. So we were to write the blessed result in the Book of Blessings, not the need. So as a spiritual community, we were being shaped, molded, and formed to be ones that spoke and served all people, and then searched for the living words that were applicable to them. And in that process of service, we started to discover more and more and more healings, increased peace within individuals, a healing recognition within themselves that they started to recognize the power and authority that Yeshua had given them. And in our basic view, we see that Yeshua said that you will do greater things than I as the Spirit of God dwells within you. And we take that very literally. So, Grace Healing Community has been centered and formed up around the experiences that I've had to reconcile from my youth on into my adulthood as a true reality that it has nothing whatsoever to do with me. But for some reason, it revolves around me. And I'm in awe and humbled by the fact that I've been blessed to fall into God's love for so many people. I mean, at this point in my life, I've been able to witness and experience the healing of tens of thousands of people in my life over a course of history that I look back at and it's like, wow. And then to recognize that I have nothing whatsoever to do with this. I'm just the one that was gifted the opportunity to witness what God was doing in them and then let them know what God was doing in them. And that's basically where I'm at is this. The community is a community that's born up out of people that have experienced what God is doing for them, and we've shared and grown as a community. And it's not that it's different from other spiritual communities or healing ministries. It's just that I feel that people find a place of safety and sanctuary in their times of need. Then they draw back into their lives and then they come back and blip, pop back up again when they need to be reconnected. So again, we're not trying to draw people away from their beliefs. We're trying to increase their effectiveness within the beliefs they choose to live. That I guess would be one difference, if you want to call it that, as a comparative, is we are not here to proselytize or take people away from a certain faith or belief. what it is, the information that we hold from within the instrument that is a covenant of love that you can get on Amazon or go to our website at gracehealing.org, is that our desire is to help people refine in their connection to God within, and then they would be increased in their effectiveness within whatever belief they choose, whether they're walking Buddhism or any form of Christianity or any form of Christianity, including the Catholic Church, or if they're functioning as a Muslim. How do we increase the awareness of God's presence within us, surrender that we are nothing, and be God's presence within us for the sake of every situation and all people we encounter? That's basically where it's been. Yeah, it's, I would say, like when it says 30 plus years, I would say that, yeah, it's closer to really 50 years of my life, but 40 years in the knowing sense of I'm moving towards something. 50 years just, first 10 years kind of bumbling, not understanding. But the core principles or beliefs are that, and again, this requires people to kind of shed what they think they know from religious instruction or institutional knowledge or psychology or psychiatry and the different things like that. It requires people to return to the true reality that there is a true author to creation. There is a preceding force that is and was always known to itself, that breathed creation into existence. And I say that word breathed for a reason, because I believe that one of the things that Yeshua, Jesus, his actual name was Yeshua, given to him before time, and then altered within the church to fit the term ye Zeus, ye, the misnomer for a letter Y in Greek, to the character Zeus because of the divine aspects. So the day I found out that his name was not Jesus and it was actually Yeshua, just in simple innocence, I decided, no, I'll start calling him by the name that God gave him, not the one that man gave him. So that's a core principle. If I discover something within me, or I discover something by support from another saying, oh, yeah, that's the way it was originally written, or this is it, the moment I recognize something that's not of truth, I set it aside and embrace the one that I see that is the core of God's presence within it. And it has to align with the living reality of the attributes of God. That would be the core principle. If there's any belief out there, and people can believe whatever they want to believe, and it's not a matter of us giving permission. It's just, I would rather honor a person and hear, okay, how do you represent your belief? How do you live your belief? And what does it do to move you closer to the nature and attributes of God? So if I see people presenting beliefs like we have a right to kill that group, or we want to tear that group down, or we want to destroy this person, I can't align with that. I can honor them and allow for them to be where they're at. And hopefully they might hear some of what we have to offer within Grace Healing that might give them freedom so they don't feel like they have to divide, isolate, separate, and bring harm to others in order to make their belief the one and only belief. Um, or to prove that theirs is the only path. I don't agree with that. I believe that there is a pure, perfect, and loving God that is perfect in all respects, precedent of creation, prior to vibrational and frequency expressions into the universe, the very core of existence, born of a singular source. And so, again, the core principles would be that there is a pure and perfect author. That pure and perfect author established an image of itself as the first utterance of creation in the first word spoken, that was Yeshua, establishing an image of self far more than just a son, but the actual image of God creator in physical form, Yeshua. And then from that, Habun spoken into creation, the living breath of God expressed through living word out into creation, which formed physical matter into an expression, realization, and an ability to witness and take form. That frequency and vibration coalesce to show physical presence. That would be the core beginning. In addition to that, in our belief within Grace Healing, we believe that this holy and perfect and omnipresent, omnipotent, divine expression of pure, absolute love beyond the definitions of human love. Like we describe it as a small L. When you're describing human love, it's a small L. But when you describe the love that is God, it is capital L, capital O, capital V, capital E. There is no love hurts. There is no love, negatives that you hear within music. There is only pure recognition of that which is whole, that which is peace, that which is purity, wisdom, clarity, discernment, unity, wholeness, and oneness. And in that, I've been moved to this place where people started reaching to me many, 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 many years ago and started seeking counsel because they were hearing things coming out of me that they felt resonant within them that wasn't part of their religious construct. And in that, I was blessed to participate, if I could describe this in a way that makes sense, I was blessed to participate with God as God came off my tongue for the sake of serving them in their times of need. And I'm sure that, there's people in the audience right now that you've experienced that. Like we call it the gift of tongues, but I think it's so much more than that. It's the reality that God overtakes our vocal center to serve the person in front of us in need. So I've been fortunate enough to have walked this journey and surrendered my tongue to God's use thousands of times. And in that, I've heard wisdom come off my tongue that I didn't even know was in me, that person felt and knew within them was absolute truth and brought healing and restoration and a restoration of their bodies and purification of their minds. So to me, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. So the spiritual counseling progressed into this combined process of spiritual revelation and physical healing. That's where that came from. Um, Basically, it comes back to the willingness to surrender. I know this may sound strange, but the mission of grace healing is to become nothing, is to become nothing so that one thing presents the living presence of God. The central mission of grace healing is to reveal the reality of that true, perfect, and loving author of creation. And I mean, that answers it. It's the central mission is to reveal that there is a living author. Now, it isn't just done by instruction. We are not running around telling people, you don't seem to understand. There is only one author. Blah, blah, blah. No, the central mission would be to live it in such a way that God's presence presents through us. The central mission would be to let go of all constructs and limitations that we've encountered through the beliefs of man, through the instructions of religion, that could somehow impede or limit the full expression of God being known instead of self. So that requires us to heighten ourselves in the attributes of God and heighten ourselves in the ability to turn toward God when situations of the world present that do not align with God's holy nature or perfection or purity, or grace. So as we encounter different things upon this earth, we encounter different things of different levels of difficulty, experiences that are unfolding that don't make a whole lot of sense. It is simple to say that, if it does not align with reason and it does not fit basic earthly decorum, so it doesn't fit divine reason, it doesn't fit in order, and it doesn't fit in the sense of unity and revelation of the one source, but it also doesn't fit in basic human decorum or decency, then it comes from another place. So if it's not of high reason, if it's not of basic human decorum, it comes of a place in the middle that we believe and understand to be the spirit realm, the order of principalities, as Yeshua named it. And in this, we are blessed to serve and guide people to this understanding. And once they begin to grasp this understanding, it manifests as healing within them, deeper empowerment, and a wonder that begins to recognize glory within their lives in ways that they never had. So that kind of gives a basic sense of the central mission. And really, I could say to you that it does impact the individuals and communities we serve in ways that I can't personally describe, but I sit there in awe and wonder in how people do when they do reach back and tell me in review that, oh my God, well, I did this and did that, and they describe things that are miraculous. And it's been a 50-year process of watching the miracles of God unfold and knowing that I have nothing to do with it and just sitting in awe, just going, wow, God, you are so amazing. So again, that central mission of my heart is to help people recognize that, yes, even in the midst of the war, the midst of the battleground, the midst of the situations that are unfolding on the earth, God is still ever present. And don't look at the difficulties upon the earth and say, God did that. No, God is the one that strengthens and carries us through this. And we are here on a mission before the presence of God to relinquish all things we encounter that are of that middle realm, that spirit realm. We choose not to embrace them. We relinquish them. We return them into God's embrace, and we choose God's holy attributes within its place. Again, back to the central mission. Yeshua said that if you release anything of a spirit nature, meaning that central spiritual realm, or the principalities, or of a demonic nature, principalities, you must welcome the presence of God, the knowing of the presence of God within this place, or many of like kind will return. So the mission is to get back to that realization that it is God within me that transmutes all things into blessing. So if I see something of brokenness or corruption that arises in front of me, I choose God instead, and that brings the change. Basically, what I just answered was that role of divine origin. Um, and now, again, this goes back to my youth when I was younger and the divine origin. And again, I was sensing something bigger than they were giving. And I was asking, well, what about the Trinity? Oh, son, don't even look at that. It's a mystery. The Trinity is a mystery. And they were saying that continually. Each time I asked the question, well, what about the Trinity? Because I had a knowing within me that it was not a mystery. And, and honestly, there's been people that have got angry with me. They've got mad because I've taken that away in the fact that I'm saying that no, if we would seek God first, seek God within, the divine origin that is God's presence within us, God has made residence within us, and the very breath that we breathe preceded with God's breath before our DNA. God's breath unfolds, our body responds and said, oh, I must breathe of the earth. But there is first the divine breath that is within us. And the divine origin, I believe and understand it to be triune in form, trinity in form, three in one. There is the preeminent or pre-existent form of God that is Yah, the very existence of created, Yahweh. That's the noun form of calling upon God creator. That is the spirit pre-existent form before creation. Then creator, by word, formed vibrational tone, spoke the first word, capital W, capital O, capital R, capital D, of creation, which was an image of self. Yeshua. Yahweh, God creator, God noun. Yahshua literally and actually means God saves. Yah saves. So that's the two legs of the triune form. Then we move into Avun. As you've heard it, they changed the name to Our Father instead of Abun, which means the breath of life, the O breathing life, the very breath of God's presence within. So again, it's absolute supreme being, pre-existent, pre-formed, before creation manifested. Yeshua, the first utterance of creation, the first living word spoken into creation, so that all might have an image of God to return to the remembrance of that which was God within. Then there's the Abun, the breath of creation expressed into living tone and formed throughout creation in vibrational expressions that form physical matter and expression. That would be the divine origin. In me, discovering that and finding that within me, and then finding that it's supported by certain scriptural references that have been altered and changed. But if you go back to the original scriptures, it speaks to the actual tone that is Yahweh, Yahshua, Abun. All these are in the original texts, but they've been moved out of the central awareness within the religious beliefs on the planet. From this discovery, I also began to realize that there was a spiritual process unfolding. There was spiritual things unfolding more than what we just see physically. And what I've witnessed throughout many different beliefs is this either appeasement of the spirit realm by praying to lesser gods, small g, or the binding, casting, and harming of the spiritual forms. But what I discovered within me as I sought God to know that, okay, God, you know of all this unfolding. You're the most powerful force preceding and manifesting through creation. Your presence manifests through Yeshua so that we have a return unto you. Your living breath is present within me. What can I do to relinquish these things? And this became the meaning of life. And I discovered within us that there was a spiritual release process that helped heal people. And many that may be watching this video have heard the things where I've shared, where an individual was dying of an overdose, had over 45 days worth of meds in him, 7 different pills, everything from opioids to lithium to chlorazepine, all this different stuff that was in his body. And just by releasing individual spiritual influences, 67 in total in his case, he was moved out of that state of dying, fully alive, and shocked the living daylights out of the sheriffs that were present within that jail. And they watched from the point that they released him into the room with me, jaundice and dying, and I was able to pray over him through a glass wall, holding a telephone, him holding the other phone on the other side, watching him change while releasing spirits within: abuse, hatred, anger, unforgiveness, multiple spirits of anger, multiple spirits of unforgiveness, multiple spirits of abuse, reaching down through this individual and seeing all these spirits loosed and freed, and watching. If you remember back in the beginning of the video, when I was in martial arts, I would reach out and I'd see something leave. So their frustration left, and all of a sudden their headache was gone after a bout where they got hurt. Or in this case, with my friend sitting in front of me, watching him being transmuted as each spirit was loosed and freed from his body, all of a sudden he was clear. And again, did not die. So with 7 different pills times 45 days of the dosages, probably about 40 days worth of dosage because there was still a little bit left in some of the bottles. About 40 days worth of pills times 7 in that body. There is no reason that he should have survived. It was 24 hours after he started the process. He didn't have his stomach pumped. There was no blood transfusion. But when all the release process was completed, maybe 12, 14 minutes, it was done. And in that, this, it is so challenging, I have to be honest with you. Because I'm seeing all these connecting points to the answers to these questions, and I can see volumes of knowledge available for each one of these things. I'm trying to provide a limited answer, and I'm going way over the time that was asked of me. But how do these concepts help people find freedom and peace? Well, it helps a person come back to the true divine origin that is God's presence within them. And all of a sudden, they start to find that certain beliefs they held don't hold power anymore. And they come back to a loving God. Like, I don't judge the things I encounter spiritually. I surrender and allow for God's presence to deal with them. So if I see within the person the spirits of abuse that he went through in his youth, I don't get angry at the abuser. I don't embrace, hostility for those that harmed the individual. I surrender that God's love is known, back to the mission, the desire to make God's presence known. So surrendering that I am nothing, that God's presence is known, and from within God's presence, all of a sudden, that abuse is transmuted and reformed in love, shaped by God's holy hand and poured back upon creation according to blessing. It's no longer holding its form. So when people are saying, I bind the demon of this, I cast the demon into the fires of hell, or I cast this into the dry places or dry place of the dry bones, I don't agree with that. I surrender to be nothing so that God is all things through me, so that anything of a spiritual nature comes under the presence of God and is restored and renewed into the blessed state that it can be in the sight of God's presence. This concept, received within people in the fullness of agreement, not only brings healing, but it brings freedom from the constructs that have held them imprisoned. And it brings peace to recognize that, oh, I remember God within me. Divine origin revealed. Um, that's a good question. As far as coming across serving individuals and churches and corporations and even animals. The funny thing is, with animals, they don't need the construct of the mind. They just receive it. So I prayed over a cat that was just struck by a rattlesnake 5 times. In other words, the rattlesnake dumped all its venom into it. The cat was dying. The human mom reached out to me and said, my poor Star, which was his name, is passing. The rattlesnake got a hold of it in the yard. And I said, well, let's just pray over it. Why don't you put me on the speakerphone? And in that, I I prayed over this cat over the phone on the speaker, and the cat was in her lap, and she was just gently stroking the cat. And all of a sudden, the cat stands up, looks at her, jumps off her lap, runs over to the litter box, vomits a bunch of times, poops out a bunch of times, then comes back up, jumps on her lap. And to this day, the cat lived out many years. I mean, actually, Star is still around. So, um, years and years later, Star is still living on the planet. So the animals just receive. They don't have to get it. They don't have to understand it. They don't have to go through the intellectual process. They just receive. Corporations, I've worked within corporations. I go in, not as I would say, you say, how do you adapt your healing work across such diverse groups? it isn't an adapt. I guess it is an adaptation in the fact that when I do center into these places, I show up as but one thing, God's love. So as I'm walking into these corporations, and I can think of one of the corporations off the top of my head, they were having severe problems with injuries. It was a manufacturing facility, and they were having problems with injuries with the people in the company. And it was centering around a certain area of work. So um, I was blessed to recognize the bravery, if you want to call it that, and conviction of the owner of a company that he was so concerned of his employees that he had to reach to the one place that he had not, which was I need to bring prayer into this company. There's something going on here. There's injury rates are way up. People are getting hurt. I don't like this and I don't like that. And so he asked me to come in, and I came in. And as I'm going along, and I did not know the history of the corporation, but what I was doing is as I was moving along, and he was taking me through the construct of the building, I was blessing and anointing the space. And as I blessed and anointed all the spaces, especially the places that were showing higher levels of injury, it kept coming to me that it wasn't just about the physicality of the space, but it was about previous ties, to the ownership. And I looked at Joe, I said, well, yeah, we're blessing this space and we're bringing blessing here. I do want to connect with the employees. Oh no, I plan on bringing them together. He said afterwards, we're going to get together after we bless the space and stuff. And all the employees were kind of around, and I had gone through, blessed and anointed all the spaces with water, and then anointed them all with holy oils and a chrism to seal the space, to know God's presence within this setting. And as we're going through it, I said, but there's a problem here. There's a tie of unforgiveness and a undoing of previous ownership. He said, oh, well, it turns out that he had a partner that had left in hostility, anger, and the owner had to actually buy him out when the other partner, was actually doing some bad stuff with the money. So the owner of the company wanted to preserve the company for the sake of his employees. This guy was just a wonderful, wonderful person. And he had a heart to want to save this entity for the sake of these people to have a livelihood. And even when the other partner was taking advantage of money situations, he just bought him out and said, go away. Well, there was still a heart of unforgiveness and ties to the old. So we prayed release of that. And all of a sudden, this corporation, now I won't go into it all now because of time and limitations, but we ended up praying over the whole body of people, and I was able to speak in awe that God put a owner of a company into this place that had such care and such concern that he decided to put God first in your company to protect you and to provide you a place of provision. And there was just wonder unfolding within the employees. There were great things that happened. So again, I just show up, and I didn't go in saying, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and I'll do that. I surrender into God, and God forms the situation in such a way that the adaptation is God revealed. So back to the central mission of Grace Healing, of revealing God. The adaptation comes by revealing God. I guess that'd be the easiest way to say that. Oh, and their injury rate went to zero over the course of months. They had a massive influx of business. They had a tremendous growth through that. They magnified in growth. They had to change their facility location and increased both divisions of their company. It was wonderful to see. But that's it for that one. Okay. It's really, especially with all the instruction that's going on in the world today about manifesting, and, if you hold this intention and that, and I just, honestly, on many levels, I do not agree with that. Um, the vision that I have for Grace Healing is the full realization of the vision that God holds for it, not what I have for myself, not what I have for Grace Healing, not what I have for Grace Healing the community, not what I have for gracehealing.org, not what I have for the manner in which God wishes to use the covenant of love to bring healing to greater numbers of people. It is about what is the vision that God is revealing? Back to the beginning. What is God revealing, and how do I align myself with God in order to be attuned to what God has accomplished already? Not something I'm about to bring about, but what has God already completed, and what's my role in revealing it to people? So, in that, what I see is Grace Healing evolving to meet the needs of greater numbers of people. Serving over these last 40 plus years of my life and being in service to others, there's times where walking this ground in the seat that I'm in my role, God has shored up, strengthened, and secured me through each and every situation I've faced, whether it was people that were trying to steal the ministry, trying to take the website, trying to take the book away. They were trying to take over the whole ministry. And I just watched as God transmuted it and brought healing into it and formed it perfectly. Other people in the world were freaking out because they thought that, you know, it's not going to work. They're going to steal the ministry. They're going to take this. No, I chose God. And I surrendered it to God to reveal what God had informed me. I said, God, this is all yours. If they are supposed to have it, let it be gone. But God changed direction, brought it back into focus and into view. This was like, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16 years ago. And in their attempt to try to steal it, I started to realize this understanding of, no, I surrender to what God is within this, not what I wish to make happen. So it's not about manifesting a certain result. It is that God has already established a blessed result. And if I align myself with God's presence, I will continue to reveal the nature of what this community is to greater numbers of people. That may be the answer to that is, and again, some of these questions are kind of hard to answer because again, I'm seeing a wealth of knowledge on either side of it, but I'm just trying to give a short excerpt of what I see. And also beyond this, when I say to you, this whole process of manifestation and co-creator, quite frankly, it's a lie within humanity. So it would be fun to be able to speak more to that for people to help them understand that because there is a deception that has come upon humanity in ways that I've watched people totally destroyed by the instruction when they're functioning and moving with purity of intent and they're functioning and moving with purity of vibrational awareness and frequency and all this stuff and then it's not manifesting and then they just destroy themselves thinking, oh my God, I'm not worthy, I'm not that. No, it's not what it is. It's about aligning oneself with divinity, aligning oneself with truth, and then all of a sudden, you, in your unfolding of life, evidence the manifest result of what Creator had already formed prior to your entering upon that. But that's just a small touch of that. Just that you have to remember that in humanity, we've shown a history of diminishing ourselves and diminishing our God. I would encourage you, please, to look within yourself in total surrender and have enough trust in a God that is so perfect and so pure that it does not align with the words that have lessened it by man. That there is a pure and perfect God that is limitless in form, pure and perfect in love, present within you to sustain you through whatever you are going through in your life. That all spiritual healing and all physical healing is present within you, poised to be revealed by your willingness to become God within you through the holy gift that Yeshua extended us when he said, you will do greater things than I as the Spirit of God dwells within you. And without getting into that too deep, there is something that Yeshua accomplished that hardly anybody spends any time on. And it was after the cross, after he entered upon the belly of the dead and he ministered unto the dead. There is a truth so deep and so profound within that, that it is the very core of what we share within Grace Healing. And if you wish to reach out to Grace Healing through gracehealing.org or the Grace Healing community on Facebook or through gracehealing.video on YouTube, or if you find yourself going onto Amazon and taking up A Covenant in Love, the meaning of life revealed, for it does reveal the meaning of life because it is so much more than humanity, which is one of the things that I see that I've watched over the years. People have become so human-centered that they have lost sight of the fact that Yeshua charged us and gave us the power to bring transformation to all realms, both that which we see with our eyes and that which is beyond our sight. So we at Grace Healing, we extend the one gift that we have that is above all gifts. It is God's holy love to you, that you might find and remember what pure, capital L love means in your life, and how freedom, peace, strength, and vitality can unfold for you as you embrace that first in everything you do. So I guess I would close in saying that the encouragement is present within you. Search to find the fortifying nature of God within. The peace that is God within you is there. Search to discover it. Allow yourself the time to separate from the influence of the world, deepen into God's presence, and become one with all that is within the world. It is not that within the world we find strength, but it is from within God we are strength that we might manifest in the world. So if you could find the very breath, the abun, the breath of God within, you may find that you could be strengthened and fortified from the depths within and find peace within every breath that you receive. So I extend to you God's love from within me and look forward to serving those who reach. Have an amazing week, month, year, and life, and know that we are here to serve you.